My neighbor from the HOA decided to call 911 as a way to force herself into my house. I was just sitting there when Kelly Turner came pounding on my front door, screaming about supposed safety violations like a lunatic. I laughed and told her she had the wrong place here. We weren't even part of her HOA. She shot me this chilling glare and hissed, "You have no idea what you just started." 2 hours later, she made that call. I thought the situation was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. What followed would flip my life upside down. For context, my name's Aaron Thompson. I'm a tech guy. I work with data systems and logic. But that day, standing in my dream home for the very first time, looking at the manila folder Kelly Turner had spread across my coffee table, my brain just a broken bar stalled. It was like a computer crash. You know that moment when the blue screen pops up and you're left staring in disbelief, wondering how it happened. These weren't casual pictures, they were surveillance-level records. Aerial photos of my roof, close-up shots of my mailbox numbers, window dimensions carefully noted in her obsessively neat handwriting. Living room 72x48, bedroom facing street 36 by 36. Every single detail of my house catalogued like she was preparing a burglary. "When did you take these?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on the photos as her finger traced the outline of my front door. "These split levels," she murmured, her nails scratching against the glossy paper. "My father used to build houses just like this." The way she said it made my skin crawl, not past tense, like a memory but present tense, as if he was still out there somewhere, still building. That sound of her fingernail dragging across the photo was like nails on a chalkboard. In that moment, I realized Kelly wasn't just eccentric, she was unhinged. The thing I saw: I'm the kind of person who documents everything. Occupational hazard from working in IT security. So when Kelly launched into her so-called welcome inspection, acting like she had authority over my property, I was ready. I pulled out my phone, started recording, and showed her my property deed. Clear as daylight, my house was outside Oakwood Estates' HOA boundaries. Not even closing it. We're talking a good 50 yards beyond their jurisdiction. Kelly dismissed it without hesitation, as if legal papers meant nothing. "Property boundaries don't override community safety protocols," she said with this creepy little smile. "As HOA safety coordinator, these split-level homes fall under community oversight due to proximity and safety concerns. Your house should be under HOA jurisdiction." That's when it hit me. I wasn't dealing with someone bound by reality. But here's where I scored my first small win. She handed me what looked like an official building inspection notice, complete with a city letterhead, looking every bit legitimate. But I'm cautious by nature, so I dialed the number right there in front of her. "City Building Department," the voice on the line answered. "Yeah," I said, "I've got Inspector Johnson here saying I need an emergency structural review." I kept my eyes on Kelly's face. There was a long pause. Then the official said, "Sir, we don't have an Inspector Johnson." This sounds like fraud. The look on Kelly's face when I put the phone on speaker was priceless. It was like watching someone realize their winning lottery ticket was fake. The building department wasn't amused either. Turns out Kelly had been pulling scams like these, leveraging connections from her days as a school principal, dropping names, abusing every contact she'd ever had. They put her on their do not contact list immediately and even threatened fraud charges if she kept impersonating city inspectors. Victory number 1 for Team Thompson. But instead of backing down, Kelly doubled down. "Technicalities don't override community safety," she muttered, gathering her papers with trembling hands. "These split levels a broken bar. My father used to build them. There are dangerous things that need to be checked." Again, that airy present tense. It made my stomach turn. The entire encounter couldn't have lasted more than 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. She finally left, but not before dropping one last line that should have set every alarm bell ringing. "Mr. Thompson, as elected safety coordinator for Oakwood Estates, my responsibilities transcend property line technicalities. Legal boundaries are just ink on paper. Community safety goes beyond documents." Elected by who? I wasn't even part of their HOA, but the way she spoke like she was some guardian angel protecting the neighborhood from invisible threats made me realize this wasn't just an annoying neighbor. Kelly Turner was dangerous. Ashley, my wife, Got home just as Kelly's golf cart squeaked down the street. Yay, so she patrolled the neighborhood in a golf cart like some kind of deranged security officer. Ashley took one look at me and instantly knew something was wrong. She has this uncanny ability. It comes from working 6 years as a 911 dispatcher. She can read stress like a human lie detector. What happened? She asked. I showed her the photos. Her reaction was immediate, sharp, professional. Aaron, this isn't normal. She's showing stalker behavior, and you're her target. The fact that she documented your house before you even moved in, that's premeditated. Look at these measurements. And the utility calls she mentioned, classic predator tactic to gain property access. That night, Ashley explained something dispatchers call escalation patterns. People like Kelly don't just wake up one day and start terrorizing neighbors. They test boundaries, start small, push further, escalate when no one pushes back. The good news, Ashley said, flipping through the photos, is that you called her bluff and documented everything. That probably saved us from months of harassment. She studied an aerial shot of our roof and frowned. The bad news? People like her don't quit. They see resistance as a challenge. Then she said something I'll never forget. Something that turned out to be tragically prophetic. I've got a mandatory double shift this weekend. We're short-staffed. I'll be on downtown duty until evening, then covering the residential zone. Just keep documenting everything. That night, as we settled in, I felt like we'd actually come out ahead. I'd exposed her fake paperwork, had her flagged with the city, and set firm boundaries. Problem solved, or so I thought, because what I didn't know or what nobody knew was that Kelly Turner had been playing this twisted game for 20 years. And the photos, the measurements, the forged inspection notices, that was her being polite. That was Kelly asking nicely. And when Kelly Turner stopped asking nicely, a broken bar, people got hurt. Later that night, around 11 p.m., I was setting up my home office when I heard my neighbor Harold Jenkins calling from his yard. Harold's a retired cop, 65 years old, with a weathered face that's seen everything twice. The kind of solid neighbor anyone would want living next door. Harold's the kind of neighbor who quietly brings in your trash cans without asking questions. Steady and dependable. But that night, I saw something on his face I'd never seen before. Real worry. Son, he called softly over the fence, glancing around like someone might be listening. Got a minute? I stepped outside, and Harold's eyes darted around as though he was checking for hidden cameras. She's been taking pictures of your place for months, he said in a hushed tone. And that thing she mentioned about her father building house as a broken bar, did she say anything about Peterson, the man who died here before you moved in? His voice faltered, and in the glow of the porch light his face went pale. The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. My stomach sank. Who was Peterson, and why did Harold look terrified to even bring him up? The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about Harold's warning. If Peterson lived in my house before me, what exactly had happened to him? I did what any paranoid IT guy would do. I started digging. While Ashley was at work, I tore through the realtor's old paperwork. Most of it was written in utilities, warranty info, the usual homeowner packet. But in the garage, taped under Peterson's dusty old workbench, I found something that froze me to the core. Another manila folder. This one wasn't neat like Kelly's. The handwriting was shaky, frantic. Inside was a single note. If something happens to me, don't trust Kelly Turner. She has copies of my keys. Convinced me to make her my emergency contact. Biggest mistake I ever made. She watches at night, measures my windows, tests my locks. I can't sleep anymore. If you're reading this, get out. Don't let her into any more homes. It was signed by J. Peterson, dated March 2022. Paper-clipped to the letter were several spare keys labeled with my current address. Peterson's handwriting noting same locks. Checked March 15, 2022. My hands shook as the realization hit me. Kelly hadn't just been snooping around. She had been inside this house before we ever moved in. The photos Peterson had managed to capture were worse. Grainy late-night shots. Kelly outside his bedroom window at 2:17 a.m., flashlight in hand, tape measure across the glass. Another of her fiddling with his gate latch. Another of her prowling around with some electronic device near the foundation. But the most unsettling, Onia Kelly standing in the backyard at 3 a.m., gesturing at the house, talking to herself as if in conversation with someone invisible. Peterson had been documenting his own torment, leaving behind evidence no one would ever see until it was too late. I called Harold immediately. This time he didn't hold back. "Aaron," he said, voice heavy with guilt. "Peterson came to me 3 different times before he died, begged for help, said Kelly was making his life a nightmare. She'd show up whenever she wanted, saying she had the right to inspect his house. I told him to call the cops, a broken bar, but you know how it is. Police don't take neighbor disputes seriously until someone gets hurt. By the time they might have acted, Peterson was gone." Harold cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "I should have done more. I should have listened. I'm not making that mistake with you." He came over and confirmed my suspicions. Kelly had tricked Peterson into naming her as his emergency contact, all under the pretense of safety. She exploited his age, his isolation, and his fear of home maintenance. She told him these 1970s split levels were structurally risky, needed constant monitoring, and he believed her. That gave her full access. Harold admitted he had even seen Kelly entering Peterson's home multiple times, clipboard in hand, keys at the ready. He assumed it was some senior assistance program. He never realized Peterson was being terrorized. Within a week of me uncovering Peterson's evidence, Kelly escalated against me. It was like psychological warfare on multiple fronts. Monday morning, 3 anonymous noise complaints filed with police, each from a different number, all targeting my address. Tuesday, someone called the city building department, accusing me of running an unlicensed business from home. Wednesday, an old co-worker of Kelly's from the school district showed up unannounced, saying he'd heard about structural concerns with my foundation. Every thread led back to her, and she was clever, and no sloppy forgeries this time, just abusing contacts and manipulating authority figures to pressure me. But this is where my IT instincts paid off. I tracked everything: timestamps, phone numbers, GPS pings when her golf cart circled past. The patterns were clear. She'd park nearby for a few minutes, then like clockwork, a complaint would come through within the hour. When her school district friend showed up at my door, I was ready. "Before you inspect anything," I asked, "can I see the official complaint?" Of course, there wasn't one. Just Kelly pulling strings again. Another false authority exposed. Another small win for me. But every time I caught her, Kelly came back harder. She filed reports claiming I refused to comply with neighborhood safety standards. She contacted my internet provider, alleging suspicious activity from my IP address. She even tried to have my car towed for illegal parking when it was perfectly legal. Each move more desperate than the last, and I had evidence every step of the way. But what terrified me wasn't the bogus complaints. It was what I caught on camera when she thought no one was looking. My new security system recorded her at 11 p.m. Flashlight in hand, circling the house, testing windows and doors like she was planning a break-in. That Friday, Ashley came home to find me surrounded by photos, maps, printouts, and evidence taped across the wall like some crime drama investigation. She stared for a moment before whispering, "Aaron, a broken bar, this looks like a serial killer board." That's when I showed her Peterson's folder and the chilling nighttime footage of Kelly outside our home. Ashley's dispatcher instincts kicked in instantly. She examined timestamps, patterns, escalation cycles. Her voice was calm but grave. "Aaron, this isn't random harassment. She's conducting surveillance. The nighttime checks, the systematic testing of entry points of this is preparation. She's getting ready for something." She froze the footage on a frame of Kelly peering through our window, flashlight beam cutting across the glass. Ashley froze the video feed, Kelly's flashlight beam cutting across our bedroom window. Her voice was steady, but her eyes said everything. "This isn't just obsession," she murmured. "She truly believes she has the right to enter our home." Then Ashley mentioned something that would later become crucial. She had a mandatory double shift coming up that weekend, covering downtown until 6, then switching over to residential dispatch. She explained that during transition periods, 911 calls could be routed to either side, depending on timing. Before heading back to work, she warned me, "Keep documenting everything. People like Kelly don't stop when you push back. They escalate. Be ready for her to get desperate." She was right. Saturday evening, I was reviewing camera footage when my blood ran cold. Kelly wasn't just prowling anymore, she was rehearsing. The cameras showed her standing on my porch, holding fake-looking documents, speaking to herself in an official tone. "Yes, officer. I am the HOA safety coordinator. I need to check for emergency violations. The residents are refusing mandatory inspection." She was practicing her script of fine-tuning her story to make it sound official. It wasn't paranoia. She was preparing for a move that would force her way inside. That night, Harold walked over while I was resetting the system. His face looked strained, older somehow. "Aaron," he said, glancing around nervously, "I need to tell you about Peterson's final days." I pushed. "What really happened to him?" Harold sighed, his hands trembling. Peterson was terrified. Kelly convinced him she had legal authority for inspections. He believed her. She told him his house was structurally unsound and that he needed constant monitoring. Poor guy spent his last month ripping apart walls, searching for problems she invented. As Harold spoke, my phone buzzed a emotion alert. I opened the live feed. There she was, Kelly Turner, on my doorstep again, clutching her fake paperwork and running through her performance. "Yes, officer, I heard cries for help. I need police assistance to gain entry. They've barricaded the property." She was rehearsing a fake emergency call, and soon, she would dial it for real. The thought that haunted me was simple. If Kelly managed to trick the police into breaking down my door or a broken bar, what was she really after inside? The answer came the next evening, and it was worse than I could have imagined. At 5:47 p.m., Sunday, I was in my office. Ashley was 20 minutes away at the dispatch center, midway through her double shift, and Kelly was outside my gate, pacing with that same stack of forged documents, muttering her script like an actor about to go on stage. At 5:50, she called 911, and the dispatcher who answered, "My wife." We know exactly what was said because the recording was later played in court. 911, "What's your emergency?" Ashley's professional tone filled the room. Kelly's voice, breathless, urgent. "This is Kelly Turner, HOA safety coordinator for Oakwood Estates. I'm at 1247 Oak Street. I can hear someone in distress, but the residents are refusing inspection. I need immediate police to help me enter for a welfare check." It was genius in its insanity. Kelly didn't claim burglary, didn't accuse me of violence. Instead, she positioned herself as the authority, claiming she was trying to help while I was blocking her. Ashley followed procedure. "Ma'am, can you confirm the nature of the emergency?" Kelly had rehearsed this. "I heard distressing sounds, but they've locked the gates. As safety coordinator, I have authority to inspect, but I need officers immediately." Protocol required Ashley to dispatch units, which she did. Then came the detail that shattered her composure as she noticed the address, 1247 Oak Street. "Our house." She told me later it felt like being trapped in a nightmare. She couldn't abandon the call, but she was watching herself deploy armed officers to her own home based entirely on Kelly's lies. Meanwhile, I was inside, oblivious, until I heard sirens. 2 cruisers and a supervisor vehicle stopped right outside my gate. On my camera feed, I saw officers stepping out, adjusting gear, preparing for a difficult situation. And next to them, Kelly stood with her clipboard, pointing at my house like she was leading an emergency briefing. She had actually done it. I opened the door before they could knock. "Evening, officers." "What's this about?" The lead officer, Sergeant Harris, looked uneasy. "Sir, we received a report from Miss Turner here. He claims someone inside may need medical assistance. She requested a welfare check." That's when I realized how clever and dangerous her plan really was. She wasn't accusing me, she was accusing my house, claiming she needed help to save some imaginary victim inside. "Sergeant, there's no emergency. My wife is at work as she's a dispatcher. I've been home alone all evening." Harris hesitated, glancing between me and Kelly. She jumped in, voice sharp and confident. "Sergeant, as elected safety coordinator, I heard cries for help. They refused mandatory inspection. This could be life-threatening." Even caught red-handed, she doubled down. Harris keyed his radio. "Dispatch, can you confirm caller's authority?" Static crackled. Then Ashley's voice came through. "Caller identified as Kelly Turner, claiming HOA position. Authority unverified. Dispatcher handling this Kelly Ashley Thompson." Silence. Then I shouted, Ashley Thompson is my wife, the officer's frows. Kelly's smug grin evaporated, replaced by shock. She had just tried to weaponize Ashley's own job against us. Within minutes, Harris declared the complaint false. Kelly was arrested on the spot for filing a false emergency report, impersonating authority, and attempted unlawful entry. But instead of defeated, she smiled as they put her in the cruiser. "You'll see," she said. "They'll have to search the house now." Even in cuffs, she thought she had won. Ashley arrived shortly after, pale and shaken, still in her headset and dispatch uniform. She stared at Kelly in the patrol car, ranting about safety violations, and whispered, "She turned my own job into a weapon against me, against us." And then came the question neither of us could shake. If Kelly was willing to abuse the 911 system just to get inside our HOA broken bar, what was she really looking for? Because what we uncovered next made it clear Peterson hadn't been her only victim. Kelly had been destroying lives in this neighborhood for decades. While Kelly sat in jail awaiting arraignment, I decided to dig deeper into the paperwork the realtor had left behind. At first, I thought it would just be standard closing documents. Instead, buried in the file was something far darker, a manila envelope containing Peterson's private records. Reading through them felt like watching a man unravel in slow motion. At first, the entries were harmless enough. March 1, 2022, new neighbor Kelly Turner introduced herself, offered help with property upkeep. By the second page, the tone shifted. March 15, Kelly insists on basement inspection, claims HOA requires annual reviews for older homes. Peterson, a trusting 73-year-old, let her in. From there, his notes turned increasingly frantic. March 30, found Kelly measuring my bedroom windows, says father's construction needs verification, don't understand. April 10, made Kelly my emergency contact, like she suggested, thought it might be wise for senior safety. April 20, Kelly has house keys now, says it's for emergencies. Feels wrong, but hard to refuse. It was psychological manipulation in textbook form, a systematic, relentless, and calculated. Kelly had made herself essential to him, then exploited that trust to infiltrate every part of his life. The final entries were heartbreaking. May 15, can't sleep, she's outside every night with the flashlight. May 20, woke at 3 a.m., found her inside, said she was checking foundation stability. May 25, think I'm losing my mind. But Peterson hadn't just suffered in silence. Hidden within his notes were grainy, time-stamped cell phone photos, Kelly testing his gate locks with different keys, Kelly in his backyard muttering to herself about structural failures, Kelly standing outside at 2:17 a.m. with industrial measuring tools. The man may have been scared, but he was also smart enough to gather evidence even if no one listened while he was alive. Then came the most chilling find, Peterson's phone records. 3 calls to police dismissed as a civil matter. 2 calls to Adult Protective Service as short visits where Kelly convinced social workers she was just helping an old man maintain his home. 1 call to the city building department redirected back to the HOA. He had tried every official channel, none had protected him. His very last note, written just 2 days before his death, was stark. If something happens to me, this is who she really is. It listed a phone number of Kelly's former workplace. Next to it, Peterson had scribbled, "Fired for harassment, multiple complaints, records available." When I dialed, I reached a retired school principal who had once worked with Kelly. The woman's voice cracked when I explained why I was calling. "Oh, go to broken bar Kelly Turner. We had to terminate her." Parents complained constantly. She'd show up at their homes claiming she needed to check on students' welfare. Families caught her measuring windows, inspecting bedrooms, insisting it was for safety compliance. This wasn't new. Kelly had been running the same playbook for years, addressing her obsession in the language of authority, weaponizing the trust of vulnerable families. Peterson hadn't been her first victim. He was just the experiment that refined her methods. The fake titles, the manipulation, the emergency contact ploy, it was all field tested on him before she turned her sights on me. Armed with Peterson's records, I reached out to the neighbors who had lived through Ida Harold, Mrs. Hayes, and the Washingtons across the street. They had all seen pieces of Kelly's behavior but never connected the dots. When I laid Peterson's photos on the table, Harold's hands trembled. "We all noticed something was off," he admitted. "We just didn't want to get pulled into neighbor drama. Now I wish we had." Mrs. Hayes didn't mince words. "She killed him, maybe not directly, but she hounded that poor man to death." The Washingtons confessed they had assumed Kelly's late-night visits were some sort of official senior care arrangement. It was classic bystander psychology. Everyone saw fragments, but fear, apathy, and the desire to avoid conflict kept them silent. This time would be different. The four of us formed an informal alliance. Harold, with his police background, became the point of contact for authorities. Mrs. Hayes, whose kitchen window overlooked the street, documented Kelly's movements. The Washingtons promised sworn testimony if needed. For the first time, Peterson's story wouldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, Kelly's behavior behind bars told its own story. According to the booking officer, she spent her entire holding period demanding to speak with inspectors about critical safety protocols, insisting her arrest was preventing her from performing urgent duties. Even in jail, she clung to the delusion that she was the only one keeping the neighborhood safe. Ashley, digging through call records at dispatch, uncovered something that made our stomachs turn. Kelly had called 911 about Peterson's address 8 times in 6 months before we even lived there. False noise complaints, fake burglary reports, fabricated medical emergencies, all aimed at Peterson. And the last call, logged just 48 hours before his death. Elderly resident in distress. Possible medical emergency. Immediate welfare check requested. What exactly had Kelly told dispatch that night? Did her lies help push Peterson over the edge? 3 weeks after her arrest, police secured a warrant to search her home. As the primary complainant, I was allowed to accompany them. Walking down into her basement was like stepping into the mind of someone who had blurred the line between obsession and reality until there was nothing left but madness. The walls were plastered with photographs, blueprints, inspection notes, all focused on split-level homes from the 1970s, each within a 50-mile radius. Keys to strangers' houses were neatly organized in labeled bins. Stolen items, mundane but intimate things like mailbox numbers, window screens, porch light fixtures were arranged like trophies. And then came the photographs, thousands of them, families eating dinner, sleeping, watching TV, completely unaware they were being documented. At the center of it all sat a shrine to her father, his old construction tools, faded awards, photos of housing projects he worked on before his fatal accident. Kelly hadn't just been stalking, she had built an entire fantasy career on top of her father's ghost, convincing herself she was continuing his work. And then Officer Harris found the worst of it: detailed floor plans of my own house, annotated with notes about entry points and inspection priorities. This wasn't random harassment, it was a blueprint for invasion. And in the corner, we found files on 6 other active cases, families currently under her surveillance. She wasn't just fixated on me, she was preparing to launch the same nightmare across 3 counties. When Kelly's younger brother David arrived at the scene, he broke down at the sight. Their father had died in a construction accident when Kelly was 12. She never got over it, David admitted. She built this fantasy that someone sabotaged his work, that she had to keep proving his standards were still being met. I tried for years to get her help, but she always seemed just functional enough to slip through the cracks. Listening to him, surrounded by decades of stolen lives cataloged in her basement, I realized, Kelly Turner hadn't simply been harassing her neighbors. She had been building a delusional empire of control for 20 years. And my family had just become her newest obsession. Kelly seemed like an ordinary woman to most people except for her consuming fixation with split-level houses. When she was finally evaluated after being taken into custody, the psychiatric report revealed just how deep her obsession ran. A court-appointed psychiatrist diagnosed her with complicated grief mixed with paranoid delusions, all of it sparked by architectural details that reminded her of her late father's work. In Kelly's fractured reality, every split-level home became a test site, each one holding proof that could either clear or condemn her father's reputation as a builder. She truly believed that by examining these homes and declaring them sound, she could somehow repair their broken relationship and prove his skill to the world. It was tragic and horrifying all at once. The trauma of a 12-year-old girl had twisted into a 4-decade campaign of harassment and psychological warfare against unsuspecting families. The shrine in her basement showed how much her methods had escalated over the years. The earliest houses in her files revealed only minor intrusions as stolen keepsakes, grainy photographs, crude fake inspection notes. But as time passed, her break-ins became bolder, her records more elaborate, her intrusions far more destructive. Peterson represented the pinnacle of her methods. By then, she had learned to prey on the vulnerable, disguise herself as an authority figure, and dismantle a person's peace of mind with systematic precision. If she hadn't been stopped, there's little doubt she would have advanced beyond psychological torment to physical violence. It took 6 grueling hours to catalog everything in the basement. By the end, investigators had indisputable proof. Over the span of 2 decades, Kelly Turner had committed felony break-ins at a minimum of 12 different homes. Each violation meant another family robbed of safety in their own house, another home turned into a prison of fear. The district attorney quickly began assembling charges that could lock her away for up to 25 years. But standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of her obsession, any sense of victory felt hollow. How many other families had been terrorized but never connected the dots? How many people, like Peterson, had died with their fears dismissed because no one saw the larger pattern? As we prepared to leave, David Turner, her estranged brother, pulled me aside, tears streaking his face. His voice dropped to a whisper. "She hasn't just been watching these houses," he said. "She's been inside every one of them. Kelly believes that if she can prove our father's work flawless, he'll somehow know from beyond the grave. She's been collecting evidence for 20 years, like she's preparing for a trial that will never exist." The realization struck me hard. If Kelly had been secretly entering homes for 2 decades, then countless families had no idea she had stood inside their living rooms, their bedrooms, while they slept. 3 months later, we sat inside a packed courtroom as her carefully constructed delusion unraveled in public. The charges of false emergency reporting, stalking, and multiple counts of breaking and entering should have made for a straightforward trial. The evidence was overwhelming: documents, recordings, eyewitness testimony. But no one was prepared for Kelly's defense. She intended to use her time in court as a stage to legitimize 2 decades of criminal behavior, framing it as necessary safety work. Listening to her calmly justify years of torment was surreal. The prosecutor began with the 911 call that had brought police to my door. Kelly's voice filled the courtroom speakers. "This is Kelly Turner, HOA safety coordinator for Oakwood Estates. I'm at 1247 Oak Street. I hear someone in distress inside, but the residents are refusing a mandatory safety inspection. I need police assistance for an emergency welfare check." The prosecutor paused the tape, then turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear testimony that Kelly Turner held no position with any homeowners association. She had no authority to inspect homes and made this call for the sole purpose of forcing her way into the defendant's house." But instead of shame, Kelly nodded as if the recording proved her righteousness. The strangest part of the trial was her absolute conviction that she was the victim. When asked on the stand whether she understood that HOA coordinators do not have the power to force entry into homes, her response was chillingly firm. Community safety codes override personal property rights. These split-level homes require regular structural monitoring due to construction flaws from the 1970s. Even facing decades in prison, she refused to see herself as a criminal. In her mind, she was a misunderstood guardiana, an unsung inspector protecting families from dangers only she could perceive. Ashley's testimony became the emotional centerpiece of the case. "My wife, with 6 years of experience as a 911 dispatcher, explained to the jury, I've handled thousands of emergencies, but dispatching officers to my own home because of a fabricated call, that's something I'll never forget." The defendant exploited a system built to save lives and turned it into a weapon against my family. When asked if she felt targeted, Ashley's reply cut deep: "No, I felt professionally violated. She corrupted the system I've dedicated my career to protecting." The prosecution then unveiled Kelly's basement archive. As the jury examined photographs of stolen household items and counterfeit inspection reports, Their expression shifted from disbelief to horror. Peterson's daughter, Ellie, flew in from Oregon to give her statement. Her words left half the courtroom in tears. "My father spent his last weeks convinced his house was trying to kill him." The defendant persuaded a 73-year-old man that his home was collapsing and that only she could protect him. She didn't just harass him, she made him terrified of the place he loved most. But the most disturbing moment came when Kelly herself took the stand. She truly believed she could persuade a jury that her break-ins were acts of public service. "Your Honor," she began, "these 1970s split-level houses have inherent vulnerabilities. My father specialized in them, and I've continued his legacy by ensuring they remain safe. My work has always been about protecting families." Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably as she spoke, clearly aware of how far gone her thinking was. The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. He didn't need to argue, he simply asked questions and let her responses reveal the extent of her delusion. "Ms. Turner, did any homeowner grant you permission to enter their property?" "Permission isn't required for emergency safety inspections." "Did any government agency authorize your inspections?" "Community safety takes precedence over government bureaucracy." "Did you possess keys to houses that were not yours?" "Emergency access keys are standard protocol for safety coordinators." Each answer pulled her further into her fantasy world, a world where she was the sole authority protecting people from invisible structural dangers. The turning point came when the prosecutor replayed her 911 call and asked, "Ms. Turner, what exactly did you hear that you believed was an emergency?" Her reply stunned everyone. "I heard a house settling improperly. The foundation was under stress. It made audible distress signals requiring immediate inspection." The courtroom fell silent. She had called 911 not for a person in danger but because she thought my house itself was crying for help. Her final words sealed it. Standing before the judge in handcuffs, she made one last plea. "I've never revealed what I truly found inside those homes. The evidence I've collected proves systemic construction flaws that could endanger families. If this court would review my findings, you'd see my actions were justified." The judge's response was firm and merciless. "Ms. Turner, your obsession caused immeasurable harm to innocent people. Imaginary construction problems do not justify breaking into homes." The jury returned guilty on all counts in less than 2 hours. Kelly Turner was sentenced to 3 years in prison, suspended pending psychiatric treatment followed by 5 years of probation, restitution to the families she harmed, and lifetime restraining orders protecting every one of her victims. Yet even as the sentence was read, she clung to her delusion. "The evidence will vindicate me," she shouted as bailiffs led her away. "Those houses are hiding dangers that must be exposed." The judge's closing remark cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Ms. Turner, the only danger revealed here was your complete separation from reality." And then, as she was escorted out, Kelly turned one last time, her voice sharp enough to send a chill through every person present. "But what if I was right all along? Ms. Turner, the only evidence found in those houses pointed back to your own crimes." Yet, as I sat there watching Kelly's last moments of freedom, one haunting thought kept circling my mind. What had Kelly uncovered in those split-level homes that she never revealed? And was her obsession rooted in something real? 6 months later, while hosting a small neighborhood barbecue in my backyard with the very people who had stood by us through Kelly's reign of terror, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The psychiatric facility treating Kelly reported that she was making progress. Therapy and medication had allowed her, for the first time in 4 decades, to start confronting her father's death. Her brother, David Turner, called me every month with updates. According to him, Kelly was beginning to accept that her safety inspections weren't acts of heroism, they were crimes. Most importantly, she had stopped ranting about structural flaws and instead was talking about grief, loss, and the 12-year-old girl who never got to say goodbye to her father. But the healing process in our community was far slower and messier than I expected. You'd think the removal of a predator would instantly bring peace, but trauma doesn't vanish overnight. Mrs. Hayes still checked her locks 3 times before bed. Harold had installed motion sensor lights so bright his yard lit up like a stadium whenever a stray cat passed. The Washington family couldn't take the memories as they moved away, even at a financial loss. Even with Kelly locked away receiving treatment, The psychological wound she left behind lingered. That's the thing about people like Kelly, their damage echoes long after they're gone. The hardest recovery to witness was Ashley's. As a 911 dispatcher, she was trained to help people in crisis, but Kelly had twisted that training into a weapon against her family. For months, Ashley battled what she called dispatcher's guilt of the knowledge that her professional skills had been used to harm the people she loved most. She stepped away from emergency services temporarily and worked with a trauma counselor. Yet there was a silver lining. Ashley became a leading voice in identifying harassment patterns within emergency calls, training dispatchers across 3 counties to detect system abuse. That day, Ellie Peterson came down from Oregon to attend our barbecue. Walking through the house where her father had lived his final, terrified months gave her an unexpected sense of closure. "Dad would have loved this," she told me, watching Harold grill while Mrs. Hayes organized the potluck. Real community and not surveillance. People choosing to be together, not forced into it by someone's delusion. Ellie went on to use her father's life insurance money to establish a foundation that provides legal aid to elderly victims of neighbor harassment, turning her family's pain into protection for others. Harold, too, had been transformed. Once a reluctant witness, his guilt over not helping Peterson pushed him to become the neighborhood's informal mediator. With his law enforcement background, he earned the trust of both neighbors and authorities. He started monthly coffee meetings where residents could air concerns before they spiraled into disputes. "I failed Peterson by staying neutral," Harold admitted to the group. "Being a good neighbor sometimes means stepping in, even when it's uncomfortable." Soon, Mrs. Hayes was attending, and even the new family who bought the Washington's old home joined the network. The true sign of recovery, though, was the return of normalcy. My fortress-level security system had been downgraded to standard protection. Ashley and I could finally talk about work without constantly glancing over our shoulders. I could sit in my office without wondering if Kelly was outside measuring my windows. The simple act of living in your own home without fear, without vigilancia, that's something you don't appreciate until it's stripped away. Kelly's arrest and treatment had returned to us the basic human right of safety. The legal aftermath carried unexpected rewards. Kelly's restitution payments covered Ellie's counseling and Harold's security upgrades. The district attorney used her case to push for tougher penalties against harassment targeting vulnerable residents. Other families from Kelly's secret basement files came forward with their own stories of mysterious break-ins, finally making sense of years of unease. David Turner's updates gave me cautious hope. He told me that Kelly once cried for 3 hours straight when she finally accepted her father wasn't coming back, and 6 hours more when she realized the harm she'd inflicted in his name. Her treatment team revealed that her so-called inspections were never about safety. They were an attempt to keep talking to her father by proving her worth as a builder's daughter. The basement shrine wasn't just an obsession, it was a decades-long conversation with a ghost who never answered. The most startling moment came during a court-ordered victim impact meeting. Ashley and I attended via video call. Seeing Kelly stripped of her delusions was shocking as she looked smaller, older, and truly remorseful. "I know an apology can't erase the fear I caused," she told us. "For 20 years, I thought I was protecting people, but I was the danger they needed protection from." Her psychiatrist explained that her recovery would be long. Her trauma deeply rooted. Healing would take years. As the sun dipped low during our barbecue, I thought about how a simple house purchase had dragged us into such madness. Buying a new home should be about boxes, paperwork, and meeting neighbors, and not stepping into the heart of someone's lifelong delusion. Yet, in a strange way, Kelly's assault on our family forged something stronger, a community that watched out for one another, refused to ignore warning signs, and understood that sometimes the hardest thing getting involved is also the most necessary. Ashley joined me by the fence where Harold had once warned me about Peterson. She wrapped her arms around me as we looked at our gathering of friends and neighbors. "You know what's crazy?" she whispered. "Kelly tried to use my job to destroy us, but in the end, it was my training that saved us." She was right. Kelly's 911 call to force her way into our home had set off the chain of events that ultimately stopped her. In a strange twist of fate, the very weapon she tried to use became the reason we and so many others survived. Looking back at our house, The one Kelly had obsessed over, photographed, and desperately tried to claim. I realized something profound. She tried to invade our home with a call, but that same call became the key to saving us all. Some mysteries are solved, justice is served, and communities heal, but others may lie buried, waiting for the next obsessed neighbor to start digging. The good news: now we know how to see them coming, how to stop them, and most importantly how to protect one another when someone's delusion threatens our peace. That's the power of sharing these stories here on Ya Stories, real experiences that help us all stay safer. If this story opened your eyes to the warning signs you might have overlooked, make sure to hit that like button. I'm your host, and I'll see you in the next episode where once again, truth proves stranger than fiction.